Hello, my name is Hagen Huber. I chose Germany for my case study. Germany is currently a democratic state that operates under its constitutional document called the Basic Law. Politically, Germany has had an unstable past, but has been remarkably stable and peaceful over the last 50 years. Germany is an example of late state formation and has seen all types of leadership. During this presentation, I will explain Germany's past, how it came to be the democratic state it is today, and some facts that make Germany stand out from other states in Europe. Germany is part of the European Union and consists of 16 states and has the largest population and economy in Europe. Berlin is Germany's capital and largest city. 80.3 billion people live in Germany. Germany has the world's fourth largest economy by nominal GDP and the fifth largest by purchasing power parity. As a global leader in several industrial and technological sectors, it is the second largest exporter and third largest importer of goods. Germany has seen many different types of leadership before it became a stable democracy. The Prime Minister or Chancellor of Prussia, Otto von Bismarck, unified Germany through a series of wars, culminating with the defeat of France in 1871. The political regime he created is referred to as both the German Empire and the Second Reich, and lasted until 1990. During the late 19th century, Germany underwent rapid economic growth and became one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Yet, unlike most other countries, economic development did not lead to democracy. Bismarck is recognized as one of history's most skillful politicians. He built a political coalition that united industrial and landowning elites in what was known as the marriage of iron and rye. Germany's military retained an extraordinary amount of influence in German politics during the entire Second Reich. The German military and its allies felt extremely insecure on the global political stage. This insecurity was one factor that led it to join other European countries in the scramble for colonies in Africa. Germany's conservative ruling establishment, comprised of the military, the agricultural and industrial elites, and the emperor himself, also felt constant threat due to internal political pressure. By 1912, the Social Democratic Party had become the largest political party in the Reichstag. Even though it had little real power, its popularity gave it considerable legitimacy. Given this, many military commanders and politicians suggested that a war against Germany's European rivals would not only improve Germany's international situation, but would also generate patriotic support for the emperor and the regime. Thus, both international and domestic pressures led German leaders to launch World War I. However, rather than stabilizing Germany's authoritarian regime, Germany's eventual defeat in World War I led to the rapid collapse of its monarchy and the creation of a democratic regime. Chapter 5 of our textbook discusses regime change. Germany's defeat in World War I led to democratization in Germany. The military's strong role in the government and foreign affairs led to the collapse of the monarchy. The book also explains the history of waves of regime change. Germany had such waves of regime changes. After World War I, Germany had its first experience with democracy under the Weimar Republic that ultimately led to the totalitarian regime of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. The Weimar Republic lasted from 1919 to 1933 and was Germany's first experience with democracy. During this period, Germany witnessed repeated political crises and was unable to weather the economic disaster of the global Great Depression, which began in 1929. By the early 1930s, the Weimar Republic had become essentially ungovernable. Anti-democratic parties gained popular support on both the fascist right and the communist left. Hitler came to power through democratic means after the 1932 election. His message of national pride and his rabid anti-socialism and anti-communism not only attracted many ordinary voters, but also convinced German political and business elites to ally with him. By 1933, the Nazis had banned all other political parties and had begun to create a totalitarian regime. It is important to note that totalitarian regimes differ from authoritarian regimes like the Second Reich in three aspects. The Third Reich clearly exhibited all the characteristics of a totalitarian regime. Nazism was a form of fascist ideology that glorified German nationalism, suggested that Germans and other so-called Aryans were racially superior to other races, and demanded greater living space for Germans at the expense of other nationalities in Europe. It led to the Holocaust, the rationalization of the deliberate murder of millions of Jews and other undesirables during World War II. Despite its systematic violation of human rights, the Nazi regime enjoyed considerable popular support. Support for the Nazi regime diminished only at the very end of the war in 1945. Germany was once again a defeated country. Recall that within 30 years, Germany had experienced tremendous political instability, going from a non-democratic monarchy in the Second Reich to a democracy in the Weimar Republic, and then to a brutal totalitarian regime under Hitler and the Nazis. After losing World War II, Germany was occupied by the military forces of Britain, France, the United States, and the Soviet Union and remained divided for 40 years. The western zones occupied by American, French, and British forces regained sovereignty in 1949 as the Federal Republic of Germany, also known as West Germany, and became a democratic state with a capitalist economy. The eastern zones occupied by the Soviet Union became the German Democratic Republic, also known as East Germany, in the same year and became a communist one-party state. The Nazis had implemented a fascist totalitarian regime. In contrast, East Germany's leaders implemented a communist totalitarian regime. The Berlin Wall was actually designed to keep East Germans in and to prevent the massive immigration of its population to the democratic West Germany. During the 1960s and 1970s, West Germany's democratic and capitalist system became one of the world's wealthiest societies. West Germany was so strong and stable that it was able to integrate another entire country, East Germany, even though East German governments had spent more than 40 years indoctrinating the population about the supposed evils of capitalism and democracy. Today, Germany anchors the European Union, a group of democratic states that unites former enemies into the largest economic bloc in the world. This transition is all the more remarkable given the history of authoritarianism and totalitarianism in Germany that I have already discussed. As I mentioned earlier, Germany's constitutional document is called the Basic Law and dates back to 1949. It was written with the goal of preventing the breakdown and collapse of democracy. The Basic Law functions so well that it was simply amended in 1990 to incorporate the territory of the former East Germany. Beginning with the executive branch, the Basic Law called for a parliamentary democracy in which the Chancellor or Prime Minister is the most powerful figure and the official head of the government. The Chancellor is elected by the lower house of legislature, known as the Bundestag. Because the Basic Law centralizes policymaking authority in the office of the Prime Minister, post-war Germany has been referred to as the Chancellor democracy. The Basic Law also created a bicameral legislature composed of the lower house, aka the Bundestag, and the upper house, aka the Bundesrat. Germany uses a complicated electoral system that combines elements of majoritarian and proportional systems. The Basic Law established Germany as a federal system. Federalism was viewed as another check on the power of the executive branch and the central government. The 16 German states control many key policy areas such as education, justice, the media, and law enforcement. Each state has its own prime minister who is elected by the state parliament. Germans are less nationalistic than any other European country, and they attend anti-war protests and demonstrations against racism instead of fascist rallies. The German experience demonstrates how malleable political identities are and how democratic values can be fostered and consolidated over time. Germany remained an ethnically homogeneous society for a long time. Until very recently, German citizenship was restricted to ethnic Germans. Toward the end of the 1980s, immigration rates increased suddenly and led to a perception among some Germans that their country was being overrun by foreigners. Since the turn of the 21st century, the debate about immigration has shifted from whether Germany is a country that supports immigration to how immigrants should be integrated into German society. Chapter 6 of our textbook talks about political identity. Germany has become a very diverse country that promotes constructivism. Germany supports integrating different races and ethnicities into politics and has modern views about women's roles. The current prime minister is a white woman who has led Germany to be more democratic, liberal, and economically stable. Because Germany is less nationalistic, the country is politically diverse. The traditional role of women in German society was often described by the so-called 4K in the German language, namely Kinder, the children, Kirche, the church, Küche, the kitchen, and Kleider, clothes, indicating that their duty was only to mainly take care of bearing and rearing children, attending to religious activities, cooking and serving food, and dealing with clothes and fashion. However, their roles have changed during the 20th century. After attaining the right to vote in German politics in 1919, German women began to take active roles in assuming positions customarily done only by German men. After the end of World War II, they were labeled as the Trümmerfrauen, or women of the rubble, because they took care of the wounded, buried the dead, salvaged belongings, and they participated in the hard task of rebuilding war-torn Germany by simply clearing away the rubble and ruins of the war. Most Germans speak German, and now you guys will listen to how German sounds to other languages.
Avion.
Aeroplane.
Aero.
Avion.
Flugzeug. Surprise.
Surprise.
Sorpresa.
Sorpresa.
Überraschung. Papillon.
Butterfly.
Farfalla.
Mariposa.
Schmetterling. Stilo.
Pen.
Penna.
Plume.
Kugelschreiber. Marguerite.
Daisy.
Margarita.
Margarita.
Gänseblümchen. Ambulance.
Ambulance.
Ambulanza.
Ambulancia.
Krankenwagen. Science.
Science.
Scienza.
Ciencia.
Naturwissenschaften.
Well, I hope some of you guys got a laugh out of that. But now for the conclusion of my presentation, I'm just going to tell you some more about what I've covered throughout this whole presentation and the democracy that Germany has become. Thanks for watching my presentation, and I hope you learned something about Germany.